In Melee, many players like to joke about how every regional power ranking has at least one Ice Climbers player in it who wobbles his way into the top ranks. Looking at the PRs of some of the biggest Melee communities shows that this supposed joke really does hold true in many states. And then there's Europe. This old, outdated ranking from Smash Europe shows that there's no Ice Climbers player who is a serious contender for winning a European major. As someone who enjoys seeing character diversity in any shape or form, even if it's in the form of wobbling, I ask myself, what have the European ICs been up to this year? Is there anyone who might be able to make the jump into our top 10 soon? In this video I will compare this year's results of all our relevant ICs players, rank them, which might be a bit controversial, and try to predict how well each of them will do in 2018. Before we get to the data, I will show you all the Ice Climbers that were, in my opinion, not quite good enough to make it into this list, and those that are definitely good enough but simply didn't attend enough tournaments in 2017 for me to be able to accurately compare them to their co-wobblers. Probably the best player who did not make the list due to inactivity is Tomber, the #1 player in Denmark. He has been an amazing player for a while now, but unfortunately he didn't really attend any tournaments. When he did go to one weekly, he double eliminated Eagle and won from winners. He will be attending Valhalla in January and has told me that he'll be attending more tournaments in 2018, so keep an eye out for this returning old school legend. Other players who didn't make the list are CC, the best ICs in France, and then there's the Dutch climbers, Jules and Fliegende Snor, with the latter having beaten highly ranked players like Chalon, Krollo and Adam. We've got Bombo from the UK and Expo, who used to be sick with ICs, but has now switched to Fox. And finally, Virtual Void from Israel, which I know is not in Europe, has done decently well at both Syndicate 2017 and DreamHack Winter, only losing to very good players. The player who was closest to being on the list but didn't quite make it was Nintendog from Norway, who has an impressive 49th place at Air 4 on his resume. However, the rest of his results, especially his placings at local tournaments, made me decide not to put him on this list and instead focus on the other 6 ICs, who are all very close to each other in skill. Before I present the final ranking to you, I will show some of the results of each of these players at the smaller tournaments they attended this year. Note that the order I introduced the players in is not the final ranking yet. Afterwards, we'll look at how each player performed at the major tournaments, and finally I'll get to the actual top 6 list. Up first, we've got the UK ICs, Alphadash and Unhaven. Alphadash is the only ICs player who has secondaries that he regularly uses in tournament. Some of the characters we've seen him use include Sheik, Peach and Falco, all of which with decent success. I could not find any tournaments that Alphadash went to where Unhaven was not present, so I will jump straight to Unhaven's results and then compare their placings at the tournaments both of them attended. While Alphadash is ranked 7th on the UK Fall 2017 ranking, Unhaven is right behind him in 8th place, jumping up 5 spots in the span of only half a year. Unhaven's impressive results in the mid to later parts of 2017 speak for themselves, especially his 3rd place at Origin in early June, where he managed to get wins over Fade, over Triforce and R23, while only losing to Vanity Angel and over Triforce in the Run Mech in Losers Finals. This tournament is arguably his 2nd best performance this year, as he outplays the likes of Mint and Time Muffin, who both ended up getting 5th, and Maxi, who got 7th. The rest of the UK regionals he attended show that he's not to be taken lightly if you meet him in bracket. Multiple wins over Sechi and Frenzy are proof that if this guy keeps getting better, he will be difficult to stop. Alphadash, on the other hand, did not attend as many tournaments as Unhaven did. The best tournaments to compare these two players are Kickstart 15 from March, Albion 2 from July, and Raid, which was in October. At all these tournaments, they ended up placing very close to each other. At Kickstart 15, they both lost to the exact same 3 players, but Alphadash managed to collect more good wins for himself than Unhaven did, winning against Sechi, Deathgazer, Vino and R23, compared to Unhaven's wins against Jolteon and Zodov. Just looking at the results from the other 2 tournaments shows that the skill difference between these 2 players, if there even is one, is really small. Next up, we've got the 2 Germans, Fatman Spam and Däumling. Däumling used to be seen as the undisputed best Ice Climbers player in Europe, but recently his results have arguably gotten worse than they were last year. Though this does not mean that he's not capable of getting top 8 at big tournaments anymore. He started off strong in 2017 by getting 5th place at Arca Melee 2 in January, beating Luke, Zodov, Aphage, Deathgazer and Ja Raiden on his way to one of his best performances this year. His showing at Awakening 2, where he took out Etriel, Belia, Blaze, Kellner and most of Austria's top players after being sent to losers very early, and his third place at the Vienna Comic Con, where he got third above all Austrians only behind Triff and Over, are proof enough that this guy still has everything it takes to make some good cash at a tournament. Fatman Spam, who was still relatively unknown at the beginning of 2017, might not have gotten to that level yet, but he's definitely on a good path. His results at smaller German tournaments have been solid. He was able to put on some decent performances here and there, and had some sort of a small breakout performance in December, where he beat both Timmy and Schlimm Shady, the latter of which he was 0-4 against in sets this year. The results of this year's German Nationals still show that Däumling has what it takes to compete on the big stage, while Fatman might need a little bit more time to be able to compete with Däumling's tournament runs. The last two climbers on this list are the Swedes, Fao and Johnnyfied. It is hard to rank Johnnyfied this year due to him not really attending many tournaments outside of a few sentenced to smash by Wiggles in Gothenburg. This still allowed him to collect multiple wins over the likes of Humpe, Rocky, Kala W and Zoller, while not losing to any players who you'd expect him to beat. Fao, another ICs who has been on the youngest of come-ups this year, actually managed to beat Dady in one set at the capital of Smash 1 in January. Both his win in winners finals and the two losses against Dady in grand finals ended with a score of 3-2. Even taking a game off of Dady is crazy if you're an ICs player. Winning a whole set is just straight up insane. At the other bigger events he attended, Fao only lost to fairly good players and beat quite a few mid to high level Swedish competitors. We can compare these two players directly by looking at Descension, Ascension 2 and DreamHack Winter. Out of these three tournaments, Johnnyfied managed to do slightly better than Fao at all of them except DreamHack Winter, where Fao won the head-to-head matchup to knock Johnnyfied out of the tournament. Overall, you can say that both of these players are without a doubt highly skilled, and it will be interesting to see what Fao will make out of the experience he's gained, and if Johnnyfied will finally go to more tournaments again. Like, seriously dude, come on! Now we're getting to the good stuff, the tournaments that at least 3 of these players attended. We'll start off with Beast 7 in February, which all of these players except for Fatman Spam competed in. Unhaven probably had the worst performance out of all the ICs here, getting 97th after losing to Nicholas 2912 and Jade, while only beating Denny, Kimo and Joanna Dark. Having to face Jade this early in the losers bracket was unfortunate, but could have been avoided had he not lost to Nicholas. On 4th place on the ranking of performances at B7 we have Alpha Dash's 49th place, beating AJP Anton and Sanchez before losing to Däumling and the UK's Jam. This performance was not too bad, but while Jam is a very good player, I'm sure that Alpha Dash was not happy with his loss. The other 3 performances of the ICs at Beast weren't easy to rank, but I put Fao in 3rd place for his win against Nicholas 2912, Kimo, Plinty and Vino without any bad losses, only losing to Matt.Zep and Fuzziness. Johnnyfied was on the path for a very good performance as he was still in losers top 32 after having beaten Jarraiden and losing to Denmark's Eagle, but due to the Ministry incident he DQ'd himself, ending up in 25th place. While Däumling had it the easiest out of all the ICs at Beast, being the highest seed and all that, his 17th place with wins over Alpha Dash, Randomness and K12, while only losing to Homemade Waffles and Android shows that he deserved the seed he was given. The next EU major and probably the most prestigious one was Air 4 in August. All ICs except for Johnnyfied were there, but it ended up not being the greatest tournament for our wobblers. Alpha Dash managed to beat Bobojack and 1-1 pools to make it into his diamond pool as a first seed. Even though he got wins over the likes of Prips and Modest Major, his losses to Over Triforce, Fao and Yogui made him get 4th in his pool, leading to a finish in 49th place. In 4th place for this tournament I've got Däumling, who even though he was seeded to make it far into the diamond bracket, busted out at 33rd place. His diamond pool looked like it would be a battle between him and Yapi for first seed, and after Yapi lost one of the first sets of the pool 2-1 to Nikki, Däumling's path seemed to have become a lot easier. Unfortunately for him though, he ended up losing his own set against Nikki too, and still tilted, he went into his next set against Samplay and lost that as well in a 2-1. When he had to face Yapi as the last set of the pool, it was clear that Yapi only needed to win one game to make it out as the second seed, due to the fact that he had won one more game against Nikki than Däumling did. Yapi took the first game and Däumling's tournament run was over. He still managed to win the set against the now styling Yapi, which is definitely quite an achievement, but considering that he was seeded to get first in his pool, not making it out is quite disappointing. Had Nikki not been a goddamn idiot and lost in round 1 of pools, this German team kill would have been avoided. Next up we've got Fatman Spam, who, even though he only placed 49th, had quite the impressive showing. Day 1 was rough for him as he lost the Ices Ditto to Nintendorg, which made his next round a little bit more difficult. He didn't give up though and beat German top player Fex, Captain Nebula and Frozenlight 1337, who had beaten Chillinduke in the same pool. His losses to Chillin and Paju were really not that bad in any way, and had he only lost to those two players he might have made it out into the Diamond Bracket as the second seed behind Chillin. However, his set loss against Bobby sealed the deal. Bobby, a Falco from France, lost every single set in this Diamond pool, except for his one set against Fatman, and this loss ended up sealing Fatman's chances of making it into the top 32 bracket at the biggest European Melee tournament of all time. The two best performances at Air 4 were by Fao and Unhaven. Even though Fao placed higher than Unhaven, 25th compared to 33rd, Unhaven only lost a single set at the entire tournament and still didn't make it out due to the unluckiest pool result I've ever seen. Not to discredit Fao though, who beat some great players like Over, Alpha Dash, Yogui and Modest Major to get 25th. Unhaven's only loss was against Dady, one of the best European players in the vs Ices matchup, and his wins at the tournament include Tech, Luke, Jules and Yabasta. The final EU major of 2017, Syndicate, featured all the relevant Ices except for Unhaven and Johnnyfied. Everyone did fairly well here except for maybe Däumling, who suffered a pretty bad loss to Desukakes in round 1 pools. This led to him having to play against Reaper in round 1 of Winners Top 64. Even though he took a game, which is impressive, it still led to Däumling starting the bracket from loser's side. It was looking like he was recovering from the early loss, beating both Jade and Kaspar V without losing a game. His next opponent was once again Nikki, the stupid idiot who had lost in round 1 pools again, leading to the German team kill again that already happened at Air. Däumling lost the set, and thus his Syndicate run came to an early halt in 25th place. Even though his losses in bracket were really not bad, all this could have been avoided by not losing to Desukakes. Like, come on man, what's wrong with these Germans and their tendencies to lose in pools? Fao once again had a very solid performance at this tournament, claiming 25th place with no amazing wins, beating Pure Skills, Krollo and Razor Ramon, but also no bad losses, only losing to Dady in winners and one of the German Peaches Kellner in losers. Even though this might not have been the placing he was hoping to achieve, he can still be proud of whom he beat and whom he lost to. Next up we have Alpha Dash's 25th place, making it into the bracket as a first seed after beating Istar in his pool. This led to him having to play against Nikki in the very first round of top 64, due to Nikki being unable to not lose in round 1 pools. Like, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with that guy? Going down to losers, he first had to face Rix, another German fox, whom he beat in a fairly solid 2-1, and then Bonnie Rotten, who he also ranked 3-0. His next set against Zoller ended up being his last set of the tournament, losing 3-1, which is a really good loss if such a thing exists. Probably the best run by an Ices player at Syndicate was by Fatman Spam. The Dutch once again showed us that seeding isn't what they're best at by having Fatman be a second seed in his round 1 pool behind Jim Morrison. This meant that Fatman was the only one of the Ices players who was not seeded to get first in his round 1 pool, but he did so anyways, beating both Jim Morrison and Maskless 2-1 to make it into top 64 winners. His first opponent was Bobby, the player who prevented him from making it into top 32 at Air, but Fatman prevailed and pulled through in another 2-1 victory. Then he unfortunately had to face Zigetto right after, and I said unfortunately because this was really unfortunate for Zigetto. Fatman collected one of his best wins so far by beating Zigetto 3-2. When he got the final hit, he jumped up and tears of joy were flowing down his face. It looked like it was straight out of some anime or some shit, and he was the main character. It was goddamn beautiful. To reward him, his next opponent was Over Triforce, whom he had beaten in a money match before. The game count was 2-2, Fatman had 1 stock at mid percents with Over being at 2 stocks. Fatman managed to get a wobble, but ended the wobble too early. Over recovered and killed his last Nana stock while at 150%. Even though Fatman managed to bring Over to his last stock, he lost the final Soko vs Sheik battle, losing the sets 3-2. Right after he got 3-0'd by Android in losers. This tournament is probably still one that he'll never forget. Looking at all these tournaments made it even clearer to me that accurately ranking these guys is going to be really hard. That's why I asked some other European top players for their help. Both Frenzy from the UK and the aforementioned Tomber from Denmark gave me their opinion on how they would rank the Ices players right now, and I think that I found a good middle ground. In 6th place I've got Alpha Dash. Putting him in last place was not easy for me, as I know that he's an amazing player. When I compared him to the 5th place finisher, Fatman Spam, I noticed that the results at regional tournaments were very similar, with Fatman performing slightly better at the EU majors. Had Alpha Dash attended more tournaments, I'm sure that he would have been capable of securing a spot above Fatman, but for now, I'll give him 6th place and put Fatman in 5th. I'd love to see Alpha Dash and all his characters at more tournaments next year, and I'm hopeful that Fatman will fix his mindset problems and improve even faster. 4th place is occupied by Unhaven. Tomber, Frenzy and I all put him in 4th place, so this might be the least controversial placing of any player in this list. Even though Beast at the beginning of the year kind of sucked for him, the rest of his year was really solid with strong performances at Air 4 and at smaller tournaments like Bristol is Godlike, where he beat both Frenzy twice and Sechi twice. His results don't quite reach the peaks and consistency of the players above him. Those players, by the way, were really hard to rank, and I have to give shoutouts to Frenzy here for discussing the top 3 with me. This is the result of me thinking about this for a long time and asking multiple people for help. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments, I'd love to discuss this even more. Alright, so in 3rd place we've got, drumroll please, Fao! Fao has collected amazing wins for himself this year. Beating the likes of Deidi, Overtriforce, Humpe, Zorg and Levinji made me seriously consider putting him in 1st place for a while. At the end though, he doesn't quite have that one really good placing at a major or enough wins outside of Sweden to quite justify putting him above either Daimling or Johnnyfied yet. I really think that these 3 are extremely close in skill, and just 1 or 2 more very good tournaments from Fao could have had him ending up in 1st place, but for now he'll have to settle with 3rd. Deciding whether to put Johnnyfied or Daimling as the currently best ICs in Europe was also a really difficult question to ask myself. While Daimling slightly underperformed at some tournaments, he still placed top 8 at a lot of bigger tournaments and has a few very good out of country wins. Johnnyfied on the other hand has beaten many of his Swedish comrades, but slightly underperformed at DreamHack Winter, losing to Amsa and Fao. This decision came down to me asking myself, are there any players that I think Johnnyfied can beat but Daimling can't? And the answer to that question was no. I do think both Daimling with his playstyle that's very much based on fundamentals and Johnnyfied with the fastest ICs I've ever seen are capable of beating many of Europe's top contenders. In the end, I had to give the number 1 spot to Daimling, simply because he went to more tournaments, both in and outside of his country. I hope that he can reclaim his old glory and get some big top 8s again, and I also hope that we'll get to see Johnnyfied, probably the most exciting ICs to watch, compete at more majors in 2018. Big shoutouts to Geeky Goon Squad and Big Good Gaming for allowing me to use footage of the sets on their respective YouTube channels in this video. My biggest thanks goes to Frenzy, Tomber and Fatman Spam, who talked to me about how these 6 players should be ranked and providing me with information on the players.